We're all good? All right. Mic check, mic check. Can you hear that one? Yes, no?
You're live.
All right. How goes it, everybody? Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm not John.
You're not.
And you're right. I'm not John. John decided he was tired, wants to take a night off and go play DJ for a little bit. So he's doing that, which leaves me sitting in front of the camera with you. So we're going to start off another guild night here. We've got an interesting guest speaker lined up for you guys. I'm sure you're going to love it. Talking a little bit about command and control, a little bit of red team and stuff. It looks like it's going to be pretty cool. I won't run my mouth here too much because I'm sure you don't care about listening to me at all. You just want to listen to him. So real quick, the events channel, there's a pinned message with all the events coming up over the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. It'll vary based on when we post it. One notable, on the 6th, there is an open house down here in the temple. So come hang out, bring your friends. We've got a CTF that's going to be happening. That's getting built by one of your new masters, Turtle. So that'll be really good. And then really all we're looking for is participation. If you are one of the people that are so inclined to stay at home and you don't like to venture out yet, the CTF will be available to you as well. So you don't have to worry about being left out in the dust. With that, we're going to go ahead and pass it over to our new guest speaker. So I'm sure you've watched his YouTube videos before for walkthroughs. Man's name is Ibsec, if you're not informed. And let's start the show.
And you're going to go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey, am I live now? Are we good? So what's going on, guys? I'm Ibsec, excited to be here, and I wanted to give this talk when Ben asked me to give a talk to you all about kind of like the transition between my videos. If you haven't seen them, if you go to YouTube, you can search Ibsec or go to ibsec.rocks. There's a bunch of videos that show me just poning a bunch of CTF stuff. But what I don't really show is like my day-to-day workflow of actual working on when I do a pen test. And I wanted to show this because I think Ben is guilty of just sticking in like the reverse shell land and not actually using a command and control, because it does take a little bit of time. And like with all things, when you're by yourself, you don't have to be efficient. You can always just work all day and be as inefficient and hammer at it. But I think this may give you an idea of what it's like in the day-to-day. So there's 3 main topics I want to talk about. It's essentially, we're going to start off with what clients want, and then kind of how we learned or how I learned to do this type of stuff. And then we'll go into command and control. We're not going to dig too much into the weeds, but if you have any specific questions, feel free to ask on YouTube or go to the guest speakers, however you ask questions when this normally happens. I have everything open. So, what do clients want? Well, number one, they want to blame you for anything and everything. Like I've been blamed before the engagement ever happens. We like sign the rules to say, yes, we're going to pen test you. And then the client comes like, our stuff is down. I'm like, well, I haven't even begun anything. So be prepared for that. And knowing this, always make sure you do a lot of good logging. I'm going to say multiple times and emphasize logs. As we can see, it is one of the topics we have in this top right that we're talking about specifically. And they will also want you to know everything, even if you lost access to the system. So for instance, like doing web pen testing a lot, I don't like putting those vulnerabilities that some scanners will show about like just jQuery being out of date or just random stuff that isn't really a finding, like, oh, this cookie's not marked secure. But every now and then you'll get clients that just say, hey, why isn't this stuff in there? And if you didn't include it as an appendix, well, you could be out of luck if you didn't save your results to be organized. So even when you choose not to include something, always make sure you have the logging down so you can go back and include it afterwards. The reason why I don't like including like the jQuery stuff is mainly because it being out of date may not relate to a vulnerability. And I want to keep the pen test report as clean as possible. I don't want to give them any ammo like, oh, these are these guys that just say this one finding all the time and can't exploit it. Like anything I put in a report, I want to make sure I can exploit and actually demonstrate the impact. So they also want to know your testing didn't introduce vulnerabilities. And this is a big one. A lot of pen testing firms have just done crazy things and left things behind because they didn't know about what they did. For instance, when you go to Windows, a lot of the PrivEsks require just writing into the Windows directory. So like the diag hub replaced like license.rtf. There's a USO loader, which I forget what file it does. WER fault, like Windows error faulting, is another common binary that is tied to PrivEsk. And the reason why that's so common is because those binaries are ones that run as system. And a lot of PrivEsks just involve DLL hijacking, which means as long as you can put a file in the directory and get that executable to load the file, you can trick it to do code execution. And when that executable is running a system, when you trick it to do code execution, you get a system shell instead of your normal shell. But if people don't really log and know exactly how their tools are working, and they just leave this DLL behind, well, the client may patch the vulnerability and fix what the right condition was into the Windows directory. But if they didn't clean that file that they dropped off, they can still be vulnerable. So you always have to do, again, good logging to know everything you did to their system. If you drop a file, make sure you log it, and hopefully you remove it when you're done. Or if for some reason, like you get caught and they say engagement over, you just give them a list of the files you dropped. And clients also want a report that doesn't make them look bad. So any critical or high finding, or anytime you throw the client under the bus in a pen test report, it's not going to end well. One of the best things you can do is whenever you have a finding, relay it to the client and have them fix it during your engagement and then verify it's fixed. And in the report, when you hand it to them, you don't hand them a report of here's everything that's bad. No one wants that. And it doesn't make like the sysadmins look good. It doesn't make anyone look good. And I mean, there may be pen tests where you don't want the sysadmin to look good, but those are the people that give recommendations to get you more work. And if you just piss someone off, they're never going to do good work. So you always want to be able to hand them a report that instead of saying, here's all the bad things, you say, hey, I was on your system for 1 month. Here's all the good we did. We fixed all these vulnerabilities. This is no longer a worry. So you always want to just, when you leave the client, to have them feeling like you did a good job and no one has bad feelings. So the main thing we want to talk about are logging, encryption, and reporting. So with logs, you should always eat your own dog food. The client's lack of logging will probably be your highest finding. At least it is in my case, because almost no clients go and use Sysmon or do any type of logging that could catch bad activity. And not only does it catch bad activity, but it will give them better performance because they'll know problems before they actually occur. And as long as you do good logging, when you say they don't, and they ever ask you a question, you're like, oh, at 12:30, we flagged your antivirus, go check your alerts. Or we just downloaded 100 plus gigs of data because we downloaded the VMware disks of a few boxes. Why don't you guys see that through your network logs? 100 gigs is pretty obvious. I think it was like the Sony breach, like 2014, 2013, when the attackers exfilled like 5 terabytes of data and no one noticed. Now it's getting easier to see the network throughput logs because devices like Unify or there's like cloud networking switches just magically show it to you. But if you never look at it, you don't know. And most day-to-day business will be relatively steady. So you'll see, oh, on most days, we go between 120 and 200 gigs of upload a day. So when 300 to 400 comes, it's kind of suspicious. And also, like when you do pen testing, hosts will go down. There's been times when like I've been the one to notify the client of an outage because they just didn't have good logging. And whenever you're on their system, they're going to try to watch it like a hawk. So if they have any normal outages, that would be blamed at you, and just be kind of prepared for that. As long as you do good logging, you'll notice the outage before they do, and you can get ahead of it. And it also helps if they go to you and you're like, oh no, I already downloaded the event log. Here's the issue. Here's why it happened. So the next thing is encryption. And this is mainly because of just nothing's worse than looking stupid, because there's been a few engagements where I've come in after the fact and saw like a SIEM alert and whatever like blinky box the client has. And pen testers are just like exfilling things, and you see like domain admin passwords going over the wire in the clear because they were using just a standard reverse shell without any like encryption. And also, once you start using crypto in your things, it can also serve as a authentication mechanism. So we had kind of have this graphic of the underpants gnomes with phase 1, 2, and 3. And this is mainly talking about lateral movement. So a lot of techniques, like at least with Windows lateral movement, it starts something up called a named pipe. And that named pipe just listens for shellcode and then executes it. And at least 2 years ago when I looked at Cobalt Strike, it didn't have any crypto there. So when Cobalt Strike set up that named pipe and expected a client to write to it, if you just gave it shellcode, you could just pop that box. So it's a huge vulnerability. The encryption kind of saves you, because if you encode your shellcode with like just 2 bytes of data, just like a simple XOR, so you just like A turns into B or something, and then now you can be somewhat confident that when that named pipe is listening, no one else can execute that shellcode. And it's very big because there's going to be times when like your tool sets up a named pipe and then for some reason doesn't get a chance to send the shellcode to it, and that named pipe kind of just stands there listening. And remote attackers can see that and be like, oh, this is just a simple give it shellcode and get shell. So always use some type of crypto, and the more you use it, the more uses you will get out of it. And then finally, clients will want a good report. And the good report includes where the company is weak. Try to give them action items on a timeline for improvement. If they don't have any logging, maybe you put that as like a later finding. That can be like, and within a year, you guys should have some type of logging. Put Sysmon, install Elastic or Splunk or Graylog or whatever solution you want. But that's not something you should focus on today. Today, you can install Labs to put unique passwords everywhere, because in this thing, we popped one workstation, got an admin password, and then used that to spray across all the environments. Another thing you can say is enabled mailbox logging in Office 365, just things that are quick wins. So always give some type of timetable for improvements. I generally do, these are things you can do this month, these are things you can do in 6 months, and these are things you can do in 1 year. And then for every finding, you want to include how you found it and try to get when it was introduced. It's normally not going to be that helpful, but if you ever like say, well, this account has the password of password123, he's a member of domain admin, and he got added to domain admin 6 months ago. That's a lot cooler than that just saying there's a weak account in domain admins with a weak password. It also helps their incident response team kind of just go and track everything like that happened in the 6 months, because it gives them a timetable. You should also include how they can fix and mitigate it, and then how they can detect it. And once you show them how they can detect it, you should try to go back in the logs and see if it's been exploited before. Because if you can ever show a client that you found badness, you're guaranteed to find a lot more business with them. There's been an engagement at a company where I was brought on, they had a blue team, a red team, and the red team had an engagement going for like 4 months that the blue team didn't know about. And one of my like closeouts is to run some host deconfliction checks to just check if any machine has been compromised. So throughout my engagement, I just take note of a bunch of like MD5 sums of suspicious binaries, things like that, and just upload them to VirusTotal, see what happens. Well, I ran PE sieve on one box and detected Cobalt Strike, which the AV didn't detect. And I thought it was like just some crimeware or something popping them. It turned out to be the red team, but my like 3 weeks of being on that system, finding the red team that has been there for months. I mean, the client just brings me back anytime I want to ask, because the blue team knows they're going to get their money's worth out of that. And now they have also put PRAC things in their IR things to run PE sieve to look for like process inspection for a bad memory. And now we know what the client wants. Let's go with kind of how we learned pen testing. Chances are you learned through just reverse shells. and they kind of follow the KISS principle, the keep it stupid and simple. Shells are super highly efficient when not at scale. They're adaptable. You can do them with bind, reverse, forward, which means like bind listens on a port, you connect to it, you get a shell. Reverse, they send a shell back to you. A forward shell is pretty complex. It's when you like make a request to a different service and have that service do a shell to bypass a firewall. If you just search like ipsec.rocks for forward shell, there'll be details about that. They work over like any protocol. You can do them over TCP, UDP, ICMP, DNS, HTTP. And the downside with the shell, though, they will let you down and desert you. And these are three main things that I found why I moved away from shells: logging in crypto, their like basicness, and the scaling problem. So when it comes to shells, you can do logging with them. If you run like the script command, it logs like input and output. If you have a Tmux logging plugin, you can log standard in and out, but it's not really good for just reading a lot of information quickly, because you're going to run into cases where some of the keywords are just all over and you just get like flood of data. Also, it doesn't really go into databases too well. So there are times when like during an engagement, when I'm just at a brick wall, I'll search through my Elastic database that contains a lot of just random C2 stuff, details I got. And I'll search for like words that have a high entropy, because you normally don't type just random words on your keyboard. And generally, when there's a word that is just random, it's a password. So you can look at their password policy and kind of mask like a regular expression to match their password policy to try to extract passwords out of just random things you may have missed. For example, like the output of a PS command or process listing. Maybe they did a MySQL command, had a -p in there, and when you were skimming through everything, you missed that password is passed into standard in, which you could have seen. So things like that definitely do help. Reverse shells are often going to be unencrypted. NCAT does support encrypting shells. You have a -SSL option, but it's just insecure by default. And insecure defaults is pretty much the reason why security is a thing. And if everything out of the box was secure, chances are we wouldn't be here today doing security. And shells quickly become unmanageable fast. Even in my videos when I'm just doing one box, whenever I get to like 4 or 5 shells, if there's a lot of small hops, I'm just going through like, which shell am I? Which is this? It's just becomes a nightmare. It's hard to stay organized. There are programs like PwnCat by John Hammond, and I forget the other person that did it, but I think they kind of violate the KISS rule to keep it stupid simple. If I was going to run an application to get a shell, I'd rather do something more C2-like instead of just trying to wrap things in reverse shell, because when I'm reverse shell, I want things to be as simple as possible. PwnCat's going to do a bunch of things like encode all the commands in base64, maybe put some encryption in there. It just does a lot of things under the hood. So if you run into an error, you never know where it is. It kind of goes back to being a sysadmin. The OSI model, like layers 1 through 7, people think that's silly, but whenever you troubleshoot, something like that is super good to know. When I'm troubleshooting a reverse shell, I want to be able to ignore any type of networking data, encoding, things like that. I just want to take those layers straight off the bat shooting. And when you use complicated tools that do shells, you can't really do that. You have to start the troubleshooting at the encoding. So the basicness of shells is also an issue. They're pretty limited. When you do advanced things in pen testing, you'll realize, I didn't have to actually touch disk to do this, but because I'm in a reverse shell, I'm just going to wget something, drop it to disk, and execute it. Of course, in Linux, you can just like pipe bash scripts of Python to standard out and pipe it into Python or bash or whatever. But if you want to execute like an ELF, exe, things like that, it becomes very difficult in reverse shells to do it in a secure manner. The benefit of having like a C2 that can load executables or DLLs in memory is antivirus becomes a lot less of an issue, because antivirus generally hooks when you touch disk. So if you're never touching disk because you have ways to reflectively load applications into your space, then AV is no longer an issue. There's a lot of like nasty copy and pasting that can lead to bad issues because the nature of a shell, you're doing pretty much the whole command every time, which means if you have a typo or something like that, you may accidentally like delete everything. Like, oh, I didn't mean to RM that directory or something. When you're in a C2, it's a bit harder to do that because you can put protections to stop you from doing that. And then like, how do I token? A lot of Windows Privest and stuff will take advantage of login impersonation, like the run as command to switch a user context, or have a process connect to your process and like steal their token. There's just a lot of things, like I think it's the incognito mode of Metasploit that gives you these features. But there's a lot of just ways a process can change who it is. In Linux, it's a lot simpler. You have sudo or su, but on Windows, it does it by tokens, and it can be tough to switch in reverse shells. And then, of course, when you make a mistake in a reverse shell, it will often lead to a lost connection. If you ever have to like Control C, I know you can fix that, but generally, you may forget. Just all the time when you do reverse shells, you lose connections. If a program has an error, it may just kill your parent process and then your shell dies. Cobalt Strike worked around that like scenario where before, like I think 6 months ago, the BOF, I forget what it stands for, bring your own framework maybe, but every command Cobalt Strike did was process injection. So if it did like a dir, it would spawn up a cmd.exe, inject the dir, get the result, and ship it back to Cobalt Strike. So just it doing that process injection everywhere made the initial beacon super stable. The downside to doing that is it's not really OPSEC safe. If you ever like have a detection for a process injection, Cobalt Strike flags all the trees. So, and we'll get kind of into those details more once we get into the C2 section. So the last thing, scaling. How do you replicate what you did on a different client? So let's say I did an exploit 2 weeks ago. This client's vulnerable. How do I just do that again? I pretty much have to start from scratch. If I have a C2, I can have a script that automates that and just lets me do the exploit. Also, are you positive you ran WinPs across all your shells? If you have 17 boxes that you have code execution on, running the same thing across 17 boxes is going to be a challenge, especially if it's something that produces a lot of output like WinPs. Like you'll just be going over that output for like 90 minutes. When if you had Empire, you could just do like invoke all WinPs, and then not only would it just run it all across all 17 hosts, it would also have some type of magical regex that just looks for the things that you care about, like grepping that red and yellow font and just showing you that. So it kind of helps you filter. You can't really share a session with someone else. You can, I guess, pipe them a shell, but there's no real collaboration. And also, how do you end the engagement? Because when you did a reverse shell, you probably created a lot of files. How do you like restore the environment to how you were before, and also make sure you didn't leave any shells running? Most C2s will have like a cutoff date, which hard codes a kill time in the binary itself. So if your engagement ends on April 1st, you put April 1st in the config. So if there's any beacons or implants running after April 1st, it just kills itself and dies. So now that we know kind of why shells are bad, let's go over to the sexy and cool stuff, the command and control. So they will keep you employed and safe. Like if you do reverse shells, chances are you're going to pipe shells back to your home, and having a corporation send you a shell to your home is never a great thing. The command and control will probably go to a central server in AWS or somewhere, and then you'll access that over SSH or HTTP. So the client never goes back to your house. It goes to corporate resources. So if something bad happens, the police get called to your corporation, not your house. Also, most commands will be logged, and you're less likely to make bad typos. They also have access to advanced features that will prevent skill plateaus. So again, like I mentioned all that token stuff before, like once you like if you don't work in that level, it won't really make sense to you. But once you start doing those things, then it does make sense and the features are there and you're much better. It's kind of like, I guess, baseball. You kind of start out with T-ball, and it doesn't really make sense how you can hit a moving object with a bat until you kind of just start trying, and eventually you get good at it. And the same thing is with pretty much anything. If you just ignore all that token stuff, you'll never learn how to do it, and that will always be just one of the weak points. Along with binary exploitation, a lot of people kind of just put that off because it's hard in assembly and they don't want to do it. So it's just a weak skill. If you want to run WinPs and Mimikatz across all the hosts, again, it's one command, and you can also do multiple engagements simultaneously. Trying to have shells when you're doing multiple engagements is an absolute nightmare, because not only do you have like 6 shells for one client, now you have 3 clients at once, which are 18 shells, and you don't know which one is which. So C2's help there. They also have infrastructure, which is great because you can block or track out of scope IP addresses, which is critical in like this COVID work from home situation where everyone's on home computers, because you don't want to go pop a home computer. No matter what someone signs, they can't grant the company, they can't grant you, or the company can't grant you access to run code on personal equipment. So if you do that, it is potential run-in with some lawyers. So you never want to do that. And if you have C2 going to a central place, number one, if that does happen, it's going to your corporation, not you. And number two, you can block those type of IP addresses. So that's good. It's all repeatable processes. IPs and domains, if they get burned, you can easily spin them back up. And you have a backlog of findings with Ghostwriter. So when you do have a finding, you don't have to write that whole one page up about the finding. You just copy and paste some new screenshots to make it look unique to that client. And it's all the same verbiage you've done before. And then if you have proper infrastructure, it will lead to super creative findings. There's been cases like I was doing phishing for a government client, and it was like my 6th time phishing them. So they got pretty good at dealing with phishing. However, I was just looking at all the hits that came back to my phishing server. And I noticed one weird IP address. And I sent all the IPs to MaxMind. And one came back owned by Kaspersky. And what was happening is someone was checking their government email on their home computer that had Kaspersky antivirus. And any email that they received, Kaspersky was using its cloud scanner, so it sent the email back to Kaspersky servers and for just, I guess, mail scanning. So while no one was dumb enough to enter the credentials in a phishing email, my phishing report still was good because I was like, well, you're sending all your emails to Russia. Probably shouldn't do that. And if I just didn't have the proper infrastructure in place and do things like that, I'd 100% overlook that. So always have good infrastructure and hygiene. Accountability, it tracks all commands. There's something called Red Elk, which will log stuff from like Cobalt Strike or Covenant into Elastic and lets you do those things. You can have AI look over your engagement. So you can, the one thing I mentioned was using regular expressions to look for passwords. You can also do like fuzzy searches. So you search like, this word, but up to 4 characters can be different, searching for things like that. Easy to search for keyboard walks and just bunches of things you can track commands if you send them into some type of database. Audit logs and encryption your stuff to prevent leaking. Almost every C2 is encrypted by default. So you never run that risk of sending a domain admin password out over clear text. You can run commands periodically and uncover new rocks. So if you just run like a PS command on Linux every minute, you may get lucky and see someone MySQL into something that has a password, or they tried to pipe a password as their username in an SSH command or something. You can also work in team. Collaboration is a big thing in most C2s. So being able to work in teams is nice. It speeds up the engagement and everything is repeatable. And then the big question when it comes down to C2s is, should you go custom or should you go open source or commercial? And kind of did a quick table here. These are benefits to custom and open source. I went the custom route mainly because it was a learning project and I just want to know exactly how C2s worked. And I learned a lot. I think one of the simplest things that I learned is how malware can have a super responsive response time to running commands without doing a lot of HTTP requests. So a lot of people think of malware as just being like a polling thing. Like every 30 seconds, it does a ask for a command. Let's see. I can probably pull up a C2. Can you guys see the screen that I'm on? Someone in Zoom? Hope I'm presenting. Not muted, right? This will be embarrassing. Okay, well, we may go back to that at the end. Maybe there's a delay, but there's custom and open source. So I was talking about the polling and I got a Slack notification. Is that someone? Okay, so we got it. This is my monitoring for Dante and Hack the Box. Oh no, this is offshore. Let's do show targets real quick. It's going across the 4 servers. I'm going to interact with OV. Something's going on with my shell. Hold on. Let's switch to Dante. Dante may be more stable. So this HTTP request, its set timeout is 45 seconds, but the response time is near instant. LS is not a command, dir. And the reason why this is because the implant is going to make a request against my HTTP server and then keep that socket alive for 45 seconds. So the C2 never closes out the HTTP request, which means soon as I give it a task, it ends that HTTP request with that task. And that will just give you a quicker response time to your C2. And knowing that, whenever I do instant response now and I see someone go interactive, I always look at like the average HTTP request time. Because if I start looking in my logs and see, oh, now there's HTTP requests lasting 25 seconds, that's not common. It's probably someone going to the C2 server and the C2 server not having a command ready. So it just says, hey, keep that HTTP request alive because I may have a command for you in a few seconds. And it goes, oh, I have a command. Here you go. Close that thing and then make another request back to me. So it's kind of why I went into trying to do my own C2. If you're an APT, like a nation state, open source or commercial is amazing because there's no attribution. If you do have custom C2s, people would be able to attribute companies you've exploited based upon just the C2 and the signatures you create. I think FireEye and CrowdStrike pretty much know everyone at Pentest because they know what my agent looks like now. But if I just ran Cobalt Strike like everyone else, then you kind of hide in the noise. Like it could be anyone. The other benefit to going open source is you can hire people off the street because everyone knows those C2s. They're also ready to go and integrate. Like there's no code to create. So creating a C2 can take weeks or months. So it's a pain. And you also don't have to know how to code to be able to run Cobalt Strike, Covenant, Civer. There's a bunch of them. And open source or commercial probably going to have more features and testing. In terms of custom, there's little fear of AV because almost every binary is custom compiled. So it's not really seen before. You full knowledge of how you kind of have an idea of saving grace at times. It's also very and so if a new ODay comes out, like a Windows Privesk, if you know the code behind your C2, you can easily add that as a script into your C2. If you don't know it, like if you're just using Cobalt Strike, something like that could be tough. And it's future proof. A lot of the open source ones now are using like .NET. I think .NET's going to go away in a few years once Microsoft gets better with the anti-malware scanning interface stuff. If you ever use like, what is it? Beef does it. There's a way to hook .NET. It's Silk ETW. Let's see. But all the function names you have, it'll pretty much be like in decompiled code. So in .NET, you have functions that you think were hidden, but if you do event tracing, Silk ETW does a great job. It would just show you all those function calls in real time. So that's why a lot of the .NET people don't really give you Bloodhound binaries. They'd much rather you like, or Bloodhound, you can get binaries, like the Powersploit devs or other things. They don't want to give you the binaries. They want you to download the source code, change the function names up to avoid flags. So yeah, and that is the presentation. Do we have any questions? I'm going to check something on the C2 and see if I can give a quick demo. Something was not working before. Let's see, open my Slack. Yeah. I have, and it's always normally after
I was talking.
I get on. I mean, there are times when like I found like a Linux box hosting Eternal Blue, which was an obvious honeypot. But about honeypots, one of the things I do that I think is pretty interesting, I will set up fail2ban to reroute instead of block and route people to a instance that logs passwords. So if you try to like SSH into my house 5 times, then IP tables, instead of blocking you, directs you to my honeypot, which is just going to start logging your passwords. And for companies, I do that because I monitor like LinkedIn and stuff and pull a bunch of previously exposed passwords to employees and set up alerts. So whenever someone gets sent to my honeypot from trying to SSH to the company and they try a password that's on LinkedIn or a credential set that's on LinkedIn, that's when the alert fires. The main issue with honeypots is trying to filter between what is actionable and what is just bot noise. And that is the best way I found of doing it, is just finding some data that would indicate that someone's specifically going after them. It's not a bot. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's an awesome answer. Thank you, thank you. Next one we've got lined up for you is, so how do you handle the situation, which I'm sure you've ran into as most have, when you're sitting on a repeat execution of an engagement, right? You're using the same exact creds from the previous for an admin, and they just so happen to work year after year, right? But the company swears up and down that they are incapable of having repeat findings.
So I don't do pen testing full time, and all my clients are like, I know most of them like CTOs personally, and that allows me to do something unique. I have a policy where if I ever have a repeat finding, that's one strike, and at three strikes, do business with the company. So that generally puts the fire under their seat. There's a few that have two strikes, and like whenever like people know, oh, one more strike, and then he won't do business with us, and he's given us good findings. Yeah. You can also, if they do have logging, I think it's like event code 4362 or 40. I forget the event code off the top of my head, but you can look at the password change event code and then show this password was never changed. Or you just do a net user command and say password last set. I'm like, this was last set before an engagement.
All right, any more questions out there, guys? Anything y'all want to ask the master here? All right, so here's another one for you. If you had to pick between platforms, not counting Cobalt Strike, of course, we all know how that tool is. If you had to pick one of the ones out there that's free right now, what would you say is your favorite?
Hold on one second. Let me look. So I would probably go to the c2matrix.com and see exactly what I want. As you see, there's a lot of C2s. You can look at the code UI, Python, C, look at what it supports. So depending on what I want, I may say, you know what, I'm going to use something I normally don't use. Let's use a DNS over HTTP. I'm like, okay, let's just try Go DOH and try this C2. I don't know if I really have a favorite. It would just come down to finding one that has the capabilities I want. So if I know like they use proxies, I just look at the proxy aware and know, oh, I don't want to use AppFell. I don't know if I really have a favorite. It would just come down to finding one that has the capabilities I want. So if I know that they use proxies, I just look at the proxy aware.
Okay. Did you have any issues that stuck out to you that you ran into when tailoring C2 to be custom for you? Anything you had an issue resolving?
Yeah, I read a lot of bad code. The issue I was trying to fix before this is I have a memory leak in Python, which I didn't even know was possible. It's just because you start using frameworks in unintended ways and you just have weird issues. Like after 24 hours, I run out of file handlers because I'm not closing an HTTP connection correctly. Never expected to run into that problem, but here I am now looking at a bunch of code to find out why the TCP connection did not close. It's probably because I'm doing something with history and saving everything. So I'm saving the handle to that connection to another variable that's just not getting cleared, which means it just stays open indefinitely. So you run into a lot of those weird issues, but those are the issues I like running into because I learn how things work.
All right, awesome. So we got one came in. What's your home lab setup like? Do you do a lot of this in home on your own kind of equipment and setup, or you do a lot of your stuff kind of out in the cloud? What are you working with?
It's home. So I have my own, like, it's all ESX. I use VMUG, VMware User Groups, which I think it's like $200 a year. It gives you access to all VMware products for learning. So like I even have my own VMware Horizon instance, which is VDIs. See if it loads right now. I'm in the middle of moving, so my home lab is not in the best shape. Come on, there we go. So, bunch of machines I have here. I have two for Linux right now, like Ubuntu and Red Hat. Or this is Ubuntu, I think.
Hey, John.
And I can go in
Go to
and
his screen.
access this. So I don't do VMs on my computer anymore. I do them all on a Dell server and have VDIs to access them. Yeah, I don't like cloud. Yeah, I have a Dell server now. I have one Dell server that's powered off. I have a do-it-yourself NAS of just custom hardware running FreeNAS. I'm probably going to move that to Linux, but it's just a pain. Like I always hate reinstalling an OS that has, I think, 16 terabytes of data on RAID 5 because, like, if I screw up, that's a lot of data I just lose. I don't really like FreeNAS that much. I'd rather just use Linux, mainly because of updating. Updating is a pain in the butt for FreeNAS. Uh, I have unified camera set up, so I don't even like log my camera feeds to the cloud. Like almost everything is against cloud. Yep.